Thank you very much for having me here today. Conservatism, neoconservatism, conservative revolution, these are all keywords that have become fashionable once again. Liberal democracies around the world are undergoing a shift to the right in their political coordinate systems. Austria has been experiencing this moment for some time now. The question is virulent in Germany due to the upcoming elections this fall. And I certainly do not need to fill you in with regard to the United States. In the next 15 minutes, I would like to take a look at the intellectual skills used in current discussions. A shift to the right in political and social discourse. What does that mean? What are the ideas behind it? Who started it and when? And what impact are they having? Let's begin. We heard this afternoon already. This is a famous quote from the history of literature. You've all seen this picture from the iconic 1963 film The Leopard, directed by Luchino Visconti and based on the novel by Giuseppe Tomasini in Lampedusa in 1963. Against the backdrop of the Italian Risorgimento, young Tancredi says the following to his aging uncle, the leopard. If we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change. That means he, Tancredi, will have to marry the bourgeois Angelica, who now has the money and the beauty the leopard's noble family lost so long ago. In other words, everything must change. Only in that way can the leopard's family continue to live as they always have and keep pace with the nouveau riche. The plan, perhaps, told more impressively in the book compared to the film, is doomed to fail. The old has been swept away by the new. Yesterday's world, with its fragile beauty, cannot be conserved. So if yesterday's world is dear to your heart, then you have certainly asked yourself the following question. How can modernization be shaped so that it is socially acceptable? How can the old and the new be combined to conserve what is worthy of preservation, and how can we assure that the new does not have a destructive effect? That brings us to the core of this whole question. I have a test question for you so that you can see for yourselves where you personally stand on a sliding scale from progressive to conservative. What do you feel about the French Revolution? At first glance, the question may appear antiquarian. It is a while ago, of course. Why should we be talking about the French Revolution today? But the question is relevant, because the French Revolution was not only the historic beginning of modern conservative thinking, it's a historic paradigm showing the intellectual and moral fall we're talking about. Do we want the positive aspects the French Revolution stands for, i.e., freedom, equality, fraternity, the values from the Enlightenment, the abolition of feudalism, and a focus on democracy and human rights? Is that correct? We all want that? And if we do, if that's what we want, it comes with a price. In the test case, the French Revolution has the right advantage. It is clear about the price to be paid. The price paid for the restructuring of society was paid for with a high death rate and revolutionary terror. Anyone who objects and says that's all a thing of the past and the question is no longer relevant has not fully understood the problem, in my opinion. The problem is, and this is exactly where the French Revolution comes into play as a test case, contrary to the philosophy of the Enlightenment, there is no enlightenment without barbarianism. Let me repeat myself to make things crystal clear. There is no enlightenment without barbarianism. With this insight, anyone who now feels a certain inner resonance has already traveled more than half the road to conservative theory. And I would now like to introduce their thinking in 3 steps. First, the question, once again, what is conservative theory in the first place? Then I will take a look at some of those who generated the ideas. And finally, the question is, what role does conservative theory play in today's society? Of course, there is also the question as to why they are compatible in today's world. I don't have a final answer to that question, but perhaps, hopefully, some food for thought. What is conservative theory in the first place? Its etymology says it all. The term comes from the Latin word conservare, which means maintain or preserve. The basic idea is the key word is the French Revolution, is evolution over revolution. Not a revolution, preferably evolution. In other words, preserving the existing order as opposed to violent destruction and disruptive replacement. Mind you, conservative theory does not reject all change. This distinguishes conservative theory from reactionary theory and ideology. Conservatism's basic principle differs from that of the reactionaries who reject all change. Change, yes, but organic while preserving time-tested concepts. No revolution. But nonetheless, there is a conflict, if not a contradiction, between conservative theory and the ideas from the Enlightenment achieved through a paradigm. And that brings us back to the issue at hand, the French Revolution. Conservative theory tends to be directed against the Enlightenment's rationalism and universalism, i.e. against the idea that humans can determine their own fate and freely shape their lives with their reason. Instead, conservative theory is based on tradition, religion, and the nature of humankind. You can, in more specific terms, say you can identify conservative theory even more specifically with fundamental values, sanctity, tradition, and authority. The conflict with the fundamental values from the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, comes to light, and this can be formulated using pairs of terms, and here are a few for you. In other words, evolution over revolution, we've already heard that, sanctity over secularism, organic expansion over rational definitions, or even more generally, nature over reason, and finally, tradition over modernism. As already mentioned, conservatism is only a counter-movement to modernism. That was as of about 1800. It requires the modern world and is skeptical, critical, and sometimes even dismissive of it. How fine the line it takes can be seen in the last two lines on this chart. These are two ugly lines. Conservative theory can quickly turn to reactionary and thus potentially extremist ideas. For example, inequality over equality. If you think of the United States and universities there, if you reject the Enlightenment's egalitarianism, you can very quickly arrive at the idea that people by nature are unequal, and that's the way it should be. All you need to do is question the Enlightenment's universalism, and there is no lack of such questions in today's world. I will not go into detail on this, but the same applies to reactionary exaggerations of conservative values such as purity, health, strength, and nationality, all of which are spin-offs from the conservative preference for what has evolved, what is natural and traditional. Where the borders between theory and ideology lie cannot be said in the abstract, and that's an important finding. We're talking here more about relative schools of thought patterns used by conservative thinkers to react to the progressive challenges of their time. And in 1800, the challenges were quite different from what we have today. Now I'd like to talk about the generators of ideas. Let's now mention the forefather of the European conservative thinking, Edmund Burke, who again reveals the substantial significance of the French Revolution. Burke's guiding principles, which emerged in direct conflict with the French Revolution, can be summarized something like this: priority to the divine over human world order, acceptance of inherent inequality amongst humans, emphasis on negative aspects of progress, and finally the bond between human moral and social order to religion and tradition. And now let's go quickly through the 19th century. As you can see here, this is only a small selection from the German tradition of conservative thinking, and I will limit myself to one single thinker from this genealogy. Hegel, you see him on the left in the bottom, the apologist from the Prussian state, a critic of Kant, and a keen observer of bourgeois society, which he describes as incurably selfish and hopelessly apparatic, a society which can be made livable with a strong state, Prussian state, as in a moral corset. Now, moving further into the 20th century, and I will limit myself to one name again, the inevitable Carl Schmitt, the Krohn jurist for the National Socialists and conservative advisor to this very day. Evergreens in conservative thinking originated from Schmitt. These include the theory that all concepts of modern theory of the state are secularized theological concepts, and that the European Enlightenment, with its concept of secular rational rule, was based on deception. And the following are also from Schmitt. The infamous friend-foe distinction as the epitome of politics. The sovereign is he who decides on the exception. And finally, the term catechon, which has recently become fashionable in Silicon Valley. This is an ancient Greek term and means the one who withholds. And it comes from Paul's second letter to the Thessalonians, where he refers to a mysterious stopping power who temporarily holds back the Antichrist until human society falls into Satan's hands. The catechon comes up again and again in Schmitt's scripts, and for Schmitt, a Catholic, it is a conservative, if need be, authoritarian power holding back decadent liberalism, which we can imagine to be the Antichrist. And now I'd like to turn to modern society, and that sets the question of conservative theory. Where do we stand today? This is the building block of conservative theory, and what are their intentions? Here we can also talk about at least one of them, Peter Thiel, one of these, a Silicon Valley billionaire and pioneer of the California variety of American neoconservatism. He acknowledges the catechon, and in his opinion, it's the tech nerds, in the broader sense, the United States, that can hold back the arrival of the Antichrist even today. For Thiel, however, the role of the Antichrist is played by transnational alliances such as the European Union. They are described as bureaucratic, anti-innovation, and authoritarian. You can see how libertarian and conservative thinking can combine to form a completely whole new mix. And if we take this even further, this leads to a typical Silicon Valley compendium of ideas known by the term tes creale. It stands for, and I'm not going to explain them all to you, but it's transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism. In a nutshell, it's about using a very long-term technologies to permanently overcome human weaknesses and weaknesses in human societies, above all democratic societies, and in this way to preserve what is worth preserving in humanity in a small horde of selected superhumans. This brings us back to conservatism. So this is a totally new interpretation. And the catechon is given a totally different thrust. This was the term used by Schmitt, but it's used by Alexander Dugin at the top right. He generated the idea of the new right in Russia and is an advisor to Putin. Dugin is a Christian Orthodox, and for him, Russia is the third Rome, and not surprisingly, the catechon. You will have guessed it already. The Antichrist plays the role of the decadent West, the liberal West. Where does all of this take us? And above all, why are we now experiencing such a wave of neoconservative thinking from Trump to Thiel to Dugin? There's been no lack of attempts to explain all of this, nor diagnoses of the times. It seems new books are published on a daily basis trying to explain to us why Western liberalism has entered into a state of crisis and asking whether we are now living in an era of neo-fascism. In brief, how did we end up here, and where could we how could we exit this crisis? Then I'd like to conclude with 3 quick charts and 3 possible clarifications. Firstly, it's all AI's fault. With fake news and strategic manipulations, artificial intelligence has destroyed every term of public rationality. That means the entire Western societies are drifting into a new era of digital fascism. Secondly, the leftists are to blame. Ever since the civil rights movements in the 60s and 70s, the West has continuously moved further to the left. And I think, a lot of which simply went too far. I've taken post-colonialism as an example, but you could just as well refer to other leftist identity policies. And the irony of it all is that identity policies are actually a conservative strategy. An important finding, by the way, is that conservative is definitely not the equivalent of rightist. Leftists can also be very conservative or make use of conservative strategies. Is neoconservatism really a reflection of how the leftists have been leading the rightists on for 50 years now? Thirdly and lastly, it's the economy, stupid. On the right, you can see the so-called Lachner-Milanovich graph, better known as the elephant curve. It shows how much more global income has increased by percentile of the global income distribution between 1988 and 2008. The curve dips noticeably in the area between the 80th and 90th percentile. This is for worldwide income, or the increase in worldwide income between 1988 and 2008. What type of people are the ones who not only have not gained anything since then, but who have also lost income relative to other populations worldwide? A final explanation is that it is the lower middle classes in rich Western countries whose hopes for advancement have not been fulfilled for about a generation now, and that is why they collectively consider the liberal democratic value promise to be a failure. Where does the truth lie? The answer in telegraphic style is it is complex. It's more complex than what you can see in just one explanation. But I hope I was able to convey the following to you. Since modern society emerged around 1800, it has developed permanently and dynamically. And this momentum led to many fears and calls to stop with every new generation, with their new developments. And one thing is for sure, as long as modern society with all its pathology exists, conservative thinking will certainly not disappear. Thank you very much.